Well, been a while since we've done one of these.
Yep, it's been a bit. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
I did propose that we could have done Madam Web for the next one, but you were on the fence about that.
Yep, and based on what you told me about that one, I was right for my I was kind of right for my fencing, you could say.
Yeah, it wasn't very good, but I don't think we need to go into that because today we're going to be covering Dune Part Two, and this one's been a long time coming because let's just say opening weekend was really crazy.
Yep.
The amount of sold out shows and all the IMAX screenings, it was nuts.
Yep, that's for sure.
I mean, my sister warned me that this was going to be a sold out show, so at least I booked mine in advance.
Yep.
But actually, the first time I saw this in the IMAX, we did have a few weak people that ruined the screening a bit. Yeah, I don't like that, but I don't need to go into that.
I think the first time for me, we had a good amount of people, but we didn't have like someone that would ruin the moment.
Yeah, they weren't smoking in the theater, but there was just a bad smell coming, and it was pretty nasty. Thankfully, the second screening we went to, they did not have that.
No.
And I would say the screenings are becoming more controlled at this point.
Yeah.
Like, it's still making money, but the hype's kind of slowly but surely dying down a bit.
Yep.
I think before we talk about this, though, I think we should talk about the first Dune a little bit.
Part one was, I think, as we kind of described in the first one, just more of a setting up, basically. Setting up the whole landscape of things.
Yeah, it was pretty much the introduction to the Dune universe, or anybody who's not quite familiar with it.
Yep.
I do know there were prior adaptations of Dune, one of which was in the 1980s. It was very divisive,
Yeah.
and I've not seen it, so I have no formal opinion of it. Second adaptation was in 2000 for the Sci-Fi Channel, which I saw a little bit of, but not really in its entirety. And so this new version was basically my first official exposure to the story.
Yeah, so similar thing. Although the difference is I didn't see the 2000 TV series. I believe I may have saw some clips of the 1980s, but I did definitely know that I did look up a little bit about the 80s, with some picture, just look at some images of the film. Let's just say there's a reason why it was decisive.
Yeah, basically, it went through several writers and directors before they landed David Lynch.
Yep.
The end result was basically people said you can't condense it into 2 hours, something minutes long. It has to be longer than that. And I think the first attempt they ever did of Dune, it would have been 5 hours long.
Yeah.
Which is why that version ended up never getting made.
Yep.
But there's a documentary that described the process of how it could have been.
Yep.
And so with the new Dune that we did get a few years back, I did like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because the director of this, he did Arrival and Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
He had really good experience in sci-fi, and that's what made me like the first one. But even I'll be the first to admit that, yes, it's an introduction. It can be a bit slow, but the slow pace is necessary because it needs to cover all the details and all the content so that it can convey whatever it needs to tell the audience.
Yep.
And yes, some people have said it's a bit of a chore to get through, but it's still a very competently well-made movie.
Yeah, at least for part one.
And then with part two, for me, this was actually on the same level of quality as the first one.
It is still a really good quality. It's almost like if you were to if you were to plug the two together, it would almost seem like kind of like a transition.
Something like that, but I look at it as one giant film, and it
Yeah.
had to be cut in half for two reasons.
Because it would be like at this point, probably you could say 6 total hours film.
Something like that. These both come close to 3.
Yeah, so that's kind of like ranging up to the 6 hours mark. With, you could say, basically plan out your day if a theater had something like this.
Oh, definitely. And I do know there are some theaters that play the Lord of the Rings trilogy back to back, the extended cuts, and it's like, oh, that's like 9 or 12 hours worth of movie.
Yep.
And you got to sort of plan your day out on that one.
Yeah, I'm sure they had intermissions too.
Oh, yeah, they do have intermissions. In Dune's case, there would be an intermission if they did do it back to back. And I was actually kind of hoping they would do both of these movies back to back, but no theater I knew was going to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe because they knew how long it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when this was coming out, I heard nothing but positive ratings across the board. Like,
Yep.
Everybody liked it, gave it 5 out of 5s.
Yep. A lot of really good reviews.
And a lot of people were saying this is to Dune what The Empire Strikes Back was to Star Wars, what The Dark Knight was to Batman, and what
Yep.
Terminator 2 was to Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting perspective, although with Dune, I kind of look at it, the idea I had going in when I first saw it was, the first one was the introduction. We had to get all the characters set up, the setting, and all the plot details and the world building. And then in the next one, we'll keep doing that, but we're going to have some more action beats to it.
Yep.
Which is what we did get with this one.
Yep.
But in this case, I feel like there's a consistent quality between the two, where they're very competently well-made movies.
Yep.
But I think the more you watch them, you might appreciate them a little more, which is actually something a lot of good sci-fi is supposed to do.
Definitely, for sure. And speaking of sci-fi, this is, story-wise, supposed to be kind of like the grandfather of a lot of sci-fi films and stories.
Definitely, because when Dune was published in the 60s, you could say it was basically the first major sci-fi story, although someone's going to correct me if there was something before Dune. I'm pretty sure of it.
Probably.
But yeah, Dune kind of set the groundwork, and then all the sci-fi stuff that you and I have grown up with, it could be because of Dune's influence.
Yep. Star Wars, maybe possibly Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica.
I think we can throw Stargate in there.
Yep. A lot of other things.
Yeah, I do know, actually, Dune, the influence of it has basically gotten to the point where some properties have tried to either emulate Dune, or basically they've emulated Dune, but have not quite gotten that tone that the book had established.
Either that, or you could say, added a different flavor to it. Like, they like the idea of, like, one sort of thing, but decides to kind of, like, do it their way, per se.
Yeah, and there's one example I can think of. It was supposed to be a franchise starter, but it didn't quite hit what they were expecting, and that was Chronicles of Riddick.
Oh, yeah?
One of Vin Diesel's projects. People who have reviewed it said that it feels like Conan the Barbarian meets Dune.
Yep.
And I kind of saw some stuff in here that Chronicles of Riddick did do.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, I can see where the influence comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But in Chronicles of Riddick's case, it doesn't really feel like a complete Dune copy, at least in my eyes.
Yep.
I'd have to dig for more details, but that's another story.
All right.
So I think, everybody has seen the movie at this point, so spoiling it would not do it any favors.
Not at this point, but we can talk about, like you were mentioning, moments and stuff like that.
Yeah, because if I were to recount the whole Dune story, I would get a detail wrong or two, and there's going to be a fan that's going to be like, hey, you got that detail wrong? Blasphemy! They would do that.
Well, I know when we were going the way back, if we want to talk about moments, the big one was how I view the hero descendant to the dark side. In this case, Paul, very similaristic to how, in terms of Star Wars wise, Anakin going to Darth Vader.
You're not the first person to actually say that, because one review, it was James Berardinelli of Real Views. Berardinelli? I think I said his last name right. Anyway, in his review, he compared Paul Atreides to Anakin Skywalker, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. But the first time I saw the movie, I didn't quite form the connection.
Yep.
You were able to get that connection a lot more than I was.
I was, and it kind of basically, I would say, because right away you can kind of see how he's trying to keep, himself in that good category, because he kind of sees, like, that prophecy is kind of building up by his success, basically. Him climbing up the hill, basically, of, like, success, basically. He's doing one small step at a time, which is building up his legacy, or at least building up that prophecy that his mother is, talking about, of this, basically, the Messiah, or the chosen one, basically.
It's a very chosen one path that he's taking, and I can see where you're coming from, where he's climbing through the ranks, and then he basically becomes like a sort of leader.
Yeah, he's bound to be it. But then he also sees in his vision through eating the spices and communicating somewhat through the desert, is that he started to see fragments of his future, of explosions, some starvation, people dying, basically.
And there's a holy war going on between all the houses.
Not quite a holy war. It's like I would kind of describe it as more kind of like the how in the prequels there was like tremor, basically. How like the Trade Federation was growing upset with the republics dealing with the Outer Rims, basically.
Yeah, and they didn't like the rules, so they decided to break off.
In this case, this is kind of like almost like a role reversal, so to speak, where the inner workings doesn't has all these houses to deal with, but one house was kind of doing something else, and they didn't like that, which is House Atreides.
Yeah,
and they just said, nope, you are completely gone. We can choose someone else.
Yeah, and I think they established that House Atreides was trying to basically lead the way, but with a heart.
Yeah.
And the Emperor's like, well, we can't have that. Weak people lead with a heart. You need to be strong-willed.
Yeah, so the Emperor didn't like the whole, like, basically the compassion, basically, like showing empathy, showing like that goodness inside of you, because he viewed it as if you do that, people could see your weakness, they could just attack you from anywhere at any time. So he said, no, we need someone that can lead, someone that's more cold, someone that can do this and that. That's why House Atreides was burnt to the ground, basically.
And yeah, and in this case, the Harkonnens, they were the cold ones that were leading Arrakis.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, you got someone who's like cold and really like evil,
yeah,
ruling Arrakis, and then you give it over to this other house that's going to do more compassion, and it's like, why did you give it to the compassion people if you had what you wanted in the first place?
Because I believe someone said it, because I think the daughter of the Emperor kind of said it in terms of like he chose the Atreides initially. It was because he viewed Leto, the leader of the house at the time, almost like a son, basically. But then when he kind of realized, that guy was going to show empathy, he's just like, as much as it pains me a little bit, I'm going to have to get rid of you, because that's not how I, want a leader to do. Or at least his successor, basically, to rule, basically.
Well, that makes sense. But it's like, couldn't he like see ahead of time that the guy was more empathetic, and he's like, oh, we don't want that. I got to keep the Harkonnens in power. I don't want to remove them.
Well, I would imagine, I believe Leto kind of showed strength with his compassion, basically. Like, he can show compassion, but if you try to do anything, he can beat you outright.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah. So after getting rid of them, though, now Paul, being the last of the Atreides, is now kind of like seeking revenge, basically, for that death, which is somewhat, you could say, anger or hatred that he's growing inside of him, basically. First it was, actually you could say this, first it was sort of fear that started to brew a little bit because of what his mother was transpiring through the desert. Anger and hatred were brewing inside of him because of what the Emperor did and the other house did to his family.
Yes. And then the suffering part, that might come later on, but I don't think it was in here yet.
No, it'll come later. But it's starting to descend, basically, of how I view of, like Anakin to Darth Vader, basically. Where Paul, he sees what he's coming, but then he still walks towards that path, basically, of what the future kind of, like, foretold, basically. So he drank that...
The elixir, or the water of life, as they call it.
Yep. And that kind of, like, I would say once he kind of reawoken from that to me, after the second viewing, was like, okay, so that's the rise of Vader. That quote-unquote rise of Vader. Where Paul, the good of Paul, is gone.
After he drinks the water of life.
Yeah, the water of life. This is what remains of Paul.
And now you've got basically this leader who's got a lot of, force in his way of doing things.
Yeah, because he saw not only the past, but the future. And what he saw from the past was part of his mother's side, which just happens to be, well, she is a descendant of the house that killed the Atreides.
Oh yeah, that was a pretty interesting reveal, I will not lie.
Yes. So after kind of realizing that per se, so it's like, well, that you kind of do have legitimacy to the throne at the same time. Both because, well, Atreides was initially chosen, but also because your lineage to the other house that the Emperor chose, you still technically have power. Or at least that right, basically, to the throne.
Mm-hmm. I think when you put it like that, I mean, it makes sense. Because I will say this, for the most part with this film, like, I liked how the story went.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a whole lot in the story where I was angry or I didn't really like it in that direction. I'd say they told it in a way that, you know, made sense for the most part. There's still maybe a few details I need to pick apart and appreciate.
Yeah.
But for the most part, what I really like about these Dune films is that they tell their stories in a way where you can follow them. There's maybe some things you want to understand a little more. They do explain it for you. Mm-hmm. But these are the kind of stories where you're interested. You want to see where it goes. Yep. And there's been instances in like different franchises where that's happened.
Yeah.
But before I get into that, because when you talk about the way Paul's descent goes with Anakin, you know how like when he drinks the water of life, the good Paul's gone, and now we've got basically this authoritarian Paul. In a way. Yeah,
this authoritarian who still has some remnants somewhat of the good Paul, because he, a couple times he goes to his, first, I'm going to say in this context, first love interest, and that being the Shani, yep. And so he kept saying what he told her in the past a couple times, like he still cares about her. But this is kind of more, at this point of time, after the drinking the elixir, kind of more of just talking out of formality instead of like that careness in his heart, basically.
Yeah, that drink pretty much changed the way he is.
Yeah.
Only in Anakin's case, basically, when he touched the lava, he was burnt ablaze, covered in third-degree burns, and that destroyed whatever there was of Anakin. And then, as he dons the Lord Vader's suit, he's now fully Darth Vader.
Well, yeah, more machine at that point than man.
Yeah.
Although he kept growing the hatred. For Anakin's case, he was taken away from his mother, which dawned upon the fear of losing the mom, even though he, again, moved away, which eventually it happened. His mom died. Then he became angry and hateful of the people of the Tusken Raiders that killed, and a lot of other things, sort of grew up a little bit, and then the burning of the lava was suffering basically, because now he's suffering for all the losses basically.
Oh yeah.
The loss of his mother, loss of Padme, loss of his best friend, loss of everything that he had.
Exactly.
Paul hasn't done the suffering part yet, like you mentioned. It is bound to get there at some point. Maybe not quite yet, but he has all the other sort of steps kind of like there. Fearful, but now he doesn't have that fear anymore because he kind of drank the elixir. But now it's kind of more anger and hatred.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it with the fear, because like he's seeing all these visions of the future and it makes him like scared.
Yep.
And he's like, could I really go through with this? Is this going to happen? And that kind of thing. I can see where you're coming from. I think in this case, though, with the writing, the way they handle it with Paul, it's much more, I wouldn't say dense, but it's more like there's a lot of complexities and detail to it.
Yeah.
Whereas with Anakin's, it's more approachable and you can understand that a little better.
Yeah, because for Anakin's case, what we saw from Anakin was, we kind of like, you could say, grew up with him in a sense, basically. Even though if you watch 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, you saw the bad, and then when you go back to the prequels, now you're seeing that how he became Darth Vader, basically. Growing up, basically. And then it's kind of like, oh, now you can see why he turned to the machine, basically. That suit.
Exactly. I think in the case though, because when you and other people were making the Anakin comparison,
Yep.
the reason why I didn't really see it at first was because Dune and Star Wars are two completely different properties in my opinion. Whereas Dune is a much more complex property, and there's a lot that you'd have to appreciate taking some time with. Whereas Star Wars is more approachable, and you'll be able to get that. It's not super complex right off the bat.
Yep.
But in Star Wars case, it's a lot more entertaining.
Yep.
And Lucas always found a way to make, at least for the most part, his scenes really interesting.
Yep.
And I'd say the people who made Dune, they do the same thing too.
Yeah.
But the director is such a fan of the source material that he's able to preserve the complex...
Yeah, the complexity.
The complexity of it so well that when he translates it onto screen, you're basically watching this film from a fan's perspective.
Yep. And there is a lot of complexity with Dune. But the reason why, how you hear from me and a few other people that compare Paul to Anakin is just because it's like how we talked about in the beginning, how Dune is kind of like this grandfather to a lot of the sci-fi films. So you can kind of see the traits follow through to other sci-fi films that it had inspired. Star Wars being the case of with the descendant from the good to bad, Paul going from this, supposedly he wants to do good, to now more authoritative, kind of like ruler, basically, and now he's going to seek conquest, basically, and revenge.
And I could definitely see that the more you describe it and the more I think about it.
Yeah, it's almost, again, and then with Star Wars case, with building up Anakin / Darth Vader, it's just like a boy who wants to do good now becomes more a hateful, vengeful machine, basically, driven to almost, you could say, conquest of sorts, even though it was more of the Emperor's idea of conquest, but he kind of goes along with it, with Vader's case. Similar traits, similarity, not exact carbon copy, but it is a trait that Star Wars, took from Dune.
Yeah, definitely, in terms of inspiration. And I do like how, they feel different. They're not carbon copies of each other, but they did sort of, Dune influenced Star Wars.
Yeah.
And, you can, like you said, you can see the similarities, but I do like how they're not carbon copies. They're completely their own thing.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, actually, in terms of, seeing these visions of the future, Paul can see these visions of the future.
Yep.
He could easily prevent all of those future visions from happening. Because that's something that kind of bothers me in storytelling is you can see these premonitions of the future.
Yeah.
You have the potential to prevent all of this.
But here's the thing though, that sometimes there's a difference between destiny and fate. Where destiny, you can change the outcome of your future, versus fate where it's no matter what happens, it's going to happen, basically. No matter how you try to wiggle your way or whatever, how if you try to avoid it, you're still going to end up at that same destination.
And I think that happened with Anakin, because I remember there are two instances in Star Wars media where he sees the vision of him becoming Vader. He knows it's going to happen. He could prevent this.
Yeah.
But he goes ahead with it because, like you said, it's fate. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah. I think there's two instances of that. I don't know if it's the exact one. One of them, I know this has become more legend, but that volume, the second volume
of Clone Wars, he has that vision of I think it's this dog alien looking thing, and he gets his hand cut off, and then it gets replaced with some other type of matter. He uses that to fight back. But then it corrupts him, and then everyone around him dies.
And then it kind of formulates into a mask, basically, which that mask is reminiscences to Vader.
Yeah.
The mask.
Yeah, that was actually a really well done moment in that series, I will not lie.
Yeah. That one, Anakin saw something, but he couldn't quite, in that particular one, he saw it, but he couldn't quite grasp of, its meaning, basically, or, what is it supposed to be, basically. Is the second one talking about the 3D?
Yeah, the CG animated series. I remember this clip. He's with these like really powerful.
Oh, okay, the Mortis gods, basically.
Yeah, he's with them. I do need to watch the series actually, but anyway, like he goes to them, and then he sees these visions of the future. He sees Palpatine. He sees Alderaan getting blown up.
All right, so I will say this since you probably didn't see this. Yes, he did see the future, but that memory of the future was actually wiped clean. So so what you saw was the son, which is kind of representation of the dark side, showing him that future, showing him that he will become Darth Vader. The father figure was like, okay, you are completely screwed up basically because of what you saw in the future. So I'm just gonna wipe your memory clean of that future.
Wait, but if he wipes Anakin's memory clean, it's still gonna happen. It's like Anakin could prevent all this.
Could have, but Anakin at that moment when he saw the future already became corrupted by the sun, basically. So it would have probably still happened, like him going to the dark side, but now he would have been kind of like out of like fearfulness, more so out of like that what Vader became, basically. Even though Vader did go to the dark side out of fear for losing people, but he grew a lot of like anger and frustration, hatefulness. This would have been a lot more just fear driven, or a full throttle fear, instead of like the other elements which would have became Sith.
Yeah, I guess really the explanations you give for why these futures can't be prevented, they make sense.
Yeah.
But it's just something that kind of bothers me in writing is like, you see all these visions, you could prevent all of this.
Yeah.
But then you said the difference between destiny and fate.
Yeah, where destiny, you can change it because it is your choice that can lead to different paths. Versus just fate, where it's just like no matter how you try to wiggle your way through, no matter what path you try to do, the destination is going to be the same at the end.
That does make sense, and I think with Dune's case, it's like those visions of the future. They could be like what's going to happen exactly, or that could be one path, or maybe that is the fate.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite completely well versed in the source material, so.
No, but what it sounds like, because the desert or the people kind of talked to them about, you're just seeing fragments, which is why you're fearful. If we show you the future, not only the past but the future, you can see what you can become and what victories that you can gain. Because all the fragments he saw was in the instance of his defeat. So he's trying to avoid like all these like defeats, whereas the future showed him a victory, but that victory kind of showed him the path of of his descent, basically of you're gonna have to become an authoritative figure, whether you liked it or not.
Well, that is a pretty good explanation of it, but it does make sense, because if it were like let's say another director or another writer did this, and they approached the writing in a not so complex way, and they spell out the whole thing for you, I would have been like, oh, this is not great. But in this case, the way you're describing it to me, it does make sense.
Yeah.
It's the kind of writing where it's like we don't really get a whole lot of that.
Yeah.
In any kind of genre,
Yeah.
Like there'll be instances where we have complex fantasy and other complex sci-fi, but we don't get this very often.
Yeah, no, it is kind of interesting with Paul's case.
But yeah, I mean, when he does become this like authoritarian figure, and he's leading the Fremen, it is a really interesting character arc for him. And if you were to watch these two films back to back, it would the connective tissue would be all the more rewarding.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And then let's go to the battle, basically, of that, because when they attacked the final battle, basically, of the film, where they kind of attacked like that base, because the Emperor accepted the challenge, basically, of Paul Atreides, basically.
Oh yeah, and then he comes to Arrakis in his big orb ship.
Yep, and any military, it's like at the headquarters, basically, you could say, the stronghold of the other house there.
House Harkonnen.
Harkonnen, yep. So they're all there, and Harkonnen is like, why are you here? And it's like, what do you think here, Sherlock? Can you explain that?
Yeah, I do like this little scene where the leader of the Harkonnens, he's like, I wasn't aware. I didn't know.
It's, and then the people are like, oh no, he's speaking truth, and it's like, and then Emperor goes, then you are truly dumb then.
Yeah, because it's like you didn't think maybe to check for those guys that were in the
South
Ornithopter, and then and then you didn't check to see if they survived and actually dumped the bodies of Jessica and Paul in the deserts.
Yeah, and it's just like, and it's like, did you check the South? Well, it's uninhabitable. Did you check? No.
We didn't check. It's like you always got to check to make sure you got the job done.
Yeah, it's like double check. You got checked anyways. You didn't, and guess what? He's alive, and now we gotta finish him off.
I think it's their hubris that like prevented them from winning.
Well, it was really from that house, or Arachne, just because their hubris, which has been showing many a times through however they kind of express themselves, the big guy being a little bit more greedy and gluttonous and stuff like that.
Definitely, because the wealth of all that spice mining basically warped his mind.
Yep. So he was always going to try to find a way to gain power because of that greed. And then you have his his nephew.
Oh, Fade Rotha.
Yep.
This guy, I want to talk about this guy for a little bit.
Yeah.
This guy was like, I loved him in this.
Yeah.
Especially the actor playing him, Austin Butler.
Yeah.
Who most people know him as Elvis.
All right.
And there could have been kind of a funny reference someone threw out in the theater where they're like, thank you very much. That Elvis impersonation.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So Fade Rotha, he's this really psychotic member of the Harkonnens, and they establish him as a sociopath, and you can feel that in his performance. You can see that, and it's like this is the type of guy you don't want to mess with. You don't know you don't know what he's gonna do, but you fear him.
Yeah.
Because he's that scary.
Yeah. Then sociopath is kind of like that correct term because he has that vibe of a serial killer, but he does it in a tactful way, basically, of kind of like expressing himself, basically, on who he is as a person, basically.
Yeah, and he enjoys actually being the sort of threatening serial killer vibe.
Yeah, the serial killer with a kind of like, oh, but I could do it in this manner, basically. I'd be like, let's just try to do it like this way instead of doing it the other way and stuff like that. He's kind of like tactical, kind of like an artist with his painting, so to speak.
Oh, definitely, and he works closely with the Baron, and they actually call out Dave Bautista on his failings. Who, the character that Dave Bautista plays was Rabba.
Yeah.
He actually calls him out. They call him out because he's like failed multiple times, and again, it's like we're gonna do it my way because your way ain't working.
Yeah, because he kept doing it kind of like blunt force, because he kept trying to shoot at just random location and hoping that it would kind of like scare them away, but it doesn't. So in this case, for the sociopath, it's kind of like, all right, we got to be more tactful with this. Attack them where we know that is a sort of like a outpost or something of cultural manner. And then if there's any survivors after the attack, we got to make sure there's no survivors, basically. So it's kind of like we're gonna bomb, we're gonna do like a bombing raid, and then we're gonna send in the soldiers in to make sure there's no survivors within the tunnels.
Oh, definitely. And the two best scenes featuring Fade Rotha, the first was the arena scene.
Oh yeah.
Which this scene I heard was actually shot in black and white.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting take on the scene.
Yeah.
But the way I kind of look at it, I don't really see it as black and white.
Yeah.
They describe the home planet of where the Harkonnens are from. There's this kind of sun that they describe.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what if there's a sun that can have this kind of light effect where everything looks black and white on the planet that you're on? I look at it that way, and it lended the scene this really epic looking, like, kind of...
Yeah.
It was really epic, because, like, the way the camera shot it, getting all those details of the arena, getting all that, and it was framed to, like, as if you're really there and you're experiencing this fight.
Yep.
It was really well done, and just the way he's fighting these powerless Atreides survivors.
Yep.
It's like he's relishing in this moment.
Yep.
so he can show just how much of a serial killer he is.
Much more of a threat, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it gives a lot of menace to Fade Rotha, and I just like how that scene establishes him as like, this is someone, you mess with him, no matter what, he's gonna find a way to tactically take you out.
Yeah, a savage who can be a tactician.
Yeah,
I was about to say a berserker with a mind, basically.
Oh yeah, and then in the arena you got those guys wearing all black.
Yep.
And they're very slender and demon looking.
Yep.
That was actually really impressive imagery, I won't lie.
Yeah.
And then the other best scene with Fade Rotha was the end fight he has with Paul Atreides.
Yep.
Where everyone around them is watching and they're
Yep.
dueling with their blades.
And also, no music.
Oh yeah, that just made it better.
Yeah.
It wasn't stylish. It wasn't anything like over the top. It was just well done enough where
Yep.
I was really engaged with what was happening.
Yep.
And as soon as Fade Rotha gets defeated, spoiler alert, he's like, "You fought well, Atreides."
Yeah.
He's looking for like a worthy opponent
Yep.
that will either best him in combat
Yep.
or will give him a worthwhile fight where
Yep.
he's like, "You didn't screw up the first time. You played your cards right."
Yep.
And that's why I respect you as a warrior.
Yep.
But I think the first time I saw that scene, as soon as the fight was over, I was like, "You keep what you kill," which is a reference to Chronicles of Riddick.
Oh yeah.
Because at the end of Chronicles of Riddick, Riddick fights the Lord Marshal, similar to this fight,
Yeah.
where all the necromongers are watching and they're duking it out. Only the Lord Marshal in this case has powers. They do fight with blades, and then Riddick eventually defeats the Lord Marshal by stabbing him in the head with a blade.
Yep.
Which is, again, what happens in Dune, where Paul stabs Fade Rotha with a blade.
Yep.
I was like, oh, so that's where Riddick got the scene from.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, anytime Fade Rotha's on screen, I just really liked his performance of how menacing and threatening and intimidating he was.
Yeah.
And how this is a guy that if, they give him as the new head of Arrakis, could this guy be worse than the Baron, which he clearly can be worse.
Yep. In his own psychotic ways. Whereas the Baron is kind of more greedy glutfulness. He wants more. And almost as, at that one scene, right before, Paul entered the throne room, you can almost see the Baron kind of like slowly crawl his way up the staircase because he saw the throne.
Yeah, and he's like, I get up there. Maybe I can get something out of this. But he doesn't make it, and then he ends up getting stabbed in the neck.
Yeah.
And then, let me think. What else can I mention about Fade Rotha? Oh yeah, that scene where he's with one of the Bene Gesserit sisters?
Oh yeah?
And then they make him go through the test. And then they have to sort of preserve whatever it is they're doing, and they basically get him to make a daughter for them.
Yeah.
That's some really cunning stuff, I will admit.
Yeah, because you could kind of say the leader of that, that older mother was kind of finding a way, because she is like that, kind of like, you can almost say the head of the inner workings, basically. But she's just trying to keep that whole house remain in still the centralized power.
Yeah, because they establish in the first film that the Bene Gesserit, I think that's what they're called. They establish that they have their own purposes and their own motives and agenda. They're kind of working separately outside of everybody else.
Yeah, although they're kind of close ties with the Emperor, basically.
Oh, definitely. And that's actually what lends to a lot of the complexity of this story is there's so many groups and you're trying to learn all their motives and why they're doing what they do. Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, so for them, the one that closely ties to the Emperor, they're trying to make sure that they remain at that highest authority, basically. So if something like, similar to the House of Atreides, were to kind of showcase themselves, try to do it in a different manner than what they like it, they'll just try to discard them and find another house that can lead, that they view as a better prospect.
Definitely, and right now with these movies, I'm not completely well versed with the source material. We know that there's House Atreides, there's House Harkonnen. The Emperor's part of his own house.
Yeah.
But if I were to dig deeper into Dune mythos, I'd like to know how many houses there are.
And also, kind of going back, that's why one of the daughter, played by
Florence, who is Black Widow.
Yep. or at least the new Black Widow.
Yeah.
She talked to the mom in terms of like, so you're the one that set up the death of House Atreides, and then the older mom goes, well, yeah, I told the Emperor to do that.
Yeah. She didn't really get a lot of screen time. I think they're saving her for later on when they make more.
Yeah. So yeah, but she was like, well, yeah, I told the Emperor to kill, suggest the idea of killing of House Atreides. They were not, they showing, they lost that promise when they showcased their hand, or at least in this case, showcased their heart.
Yeah, and it's like she's like trying to make sense of all of it, and yeah, again, really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
The way they describe it, it's like this is the kind of dialogue where you hear it more than once.
Yeah.
It makes a little more sense, for me at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, really fascinating stuff, and just all the character interactions that happen in this.
Yeah.
But again, with the Princess Irulan, that's her name.
Yep.
I think she'll be kind of a key character in later stories. But again, I'm not completely familiar with Dune.
I believe, if I remember looking up the whole story, in her case, she does become the titled wife of Paul Atreides.
Well, what I do remember is like Paul really loves Chani.
Yep.
And she's the one that bears his kids, whereas Paul doesn't. Yeah, he's married to the princess, but they don't really form any like descendants.
No, which, we're actually in the terms of the story, she kind of gets jealous of the first one.
Oh yeah, that's that scene where like at the end where Paul he's like, I'm gonna take your daughter's hand, Emperor, and then you see Chani's reaction, and it's like,
yeah, but and then you see the princess, and they kind of look at each other because it's like that, kind of like, okay, who has him, more basically, who actually won him over more. Right now, it seems like it's the princess, but in terms of the story, it is actually Chani.
yeah, that's what I remember. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it is kind of that look where it's like, oh, he likes me more. No, he likes me more. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like that, kind of like the who has him basically more.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting reaction, but maybe this would have been a joke scene had they put it in the movie, but what if there was a Fremen that Tom Holland played? Because Tom Holland and Zendaya, they're dating in real life.
Yeah.
So it's like, what if you saw a Fremen played by Tom Holland, and then he's like, ooh, Paul's with the princess now, maybe I can make my move on Shani.
I probably would have had like a Deadpool just been like, nah, let the boy be a player.
Yeah, they could have thrown in a joke scene like that if they wanted to.
Yeah.
In some parody, not in the actual adaptation,
Yeah,
but
no.
that's where YouTube parodies come into play. But anyway,
Yeah.
I will say this though about the Dune films, and there was a minimal amount of this in the first one, but any scene featuring the sandworms,
Oh yeah.
impressive.
They are like gigantic and pretty impressive.
Yeah, because it's like we know how big they are, and there was a sculpture drawing art of one of them in the first movie of how large they can get.
Yep.
And it's like you really want to see these things in action, and anytime they're in action in this, I'm just blown away.
Yeah.
I think the first time I saw it on an IMAX, I was just blown away by how big they were and like what they're capable of.
Yeah.
The fact that you could ride on the back of them.
Yep.
You're basically a worm rider.
Yep.
And it's like, is there any other wildlife on Arrakis or in this Dune universe that can like come close to the worms? I don't know.
Don't know, but they are gigantic, and you can use it for transportation of sorts and ramming, as saw in the initial battle.
Yeah, and it's like if I were to watch the other Dune adaptations, the worms would pale in comparison to this one.
Yeah.
Because it's like the director of this really knows how like kaiju-sized these worms are.
Oh yeah.
What kind of potential they can do.
Yeah.
And how they can be like harnessed, you could say.
Yeah.
Like they're just some of the most impressive large-scale creatures I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've seen a lot of impressive large-scale creatures, but this was epic.
Yeah.
Especially the shots where they bring like a legion of them to the Emperor's stronghold, and they're riding on the backs of them.
Yep. So they're ramming, and also at the same time the worms are sort of eating anything that's in the way.
Oh yeah, but we don't actually see anything get crushed. You just get like swallowed up by this like
Yeah.
large pit, and you sort of sink into the sand a bit.
Yeah.
That's some really daunting stuff.
Yep, definitely for sure.
Daunting? No, scary maybe.
Scary, yeah, or frightening, or whatever the case may be. Yep. But as we also go to the battle again, you can kind of see the death of house our was it the other house, the arcade Harkonnens, wherever it is, the first guy dying by the hand of the Paul's other master. You know the one that
yeah, you're talking Dave Bautista's death.
Yeah.
I will admit that was actually anticlimactic. Like I thought there would have been a fight between the two.
Yeah, well, it was like a 5-second fight.
Yeah, but it's like Josh Brolin going up against Dave Bautista. That's basically Drax going up against Thanos. You want to see a good fight, but it's anticlimactic.
But again, Thanos would have killed Drax in like 5 seconds, which is what happened.
Well, yeah, but I think there was side note. There was one thing in Marvel's comics where Drax did kill Thanos.
Yeah. In probably one of the comics, yeah.
Yeah, I would have wanted to have seen a fight between those two that didn't last 5 minutes or 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's same thing with Dune. It's like you got Dave Bautista, who was in the WWE, and then you got Josh Brolin. Give us a really good fight between these two.
Yep. And then the Baron's death, which is just almost kind of like an assassination on any emperor ever.
Yeah.
And then the final fight scene.
Yeah, and that was actually, again, really well done.
Yep.
And basically Paul becomes emperor by his own hand by doing that.
Yep.
Although I kind of want to see how they play it out in a future one. If they do keep Christopher Walken for more, I don't know. But it'd be kind of interesting to see how they play that out. But yeah, there were a lot of really good fights in this. Yeah. Lots of really impressive action. There was one action moment in particular that I think lent to the best epic imagery that was in this movie. But give us a sec, folks. Just gotta check something quick.
All right.
All right, so basically, sorry about that, but basically, the best epic thing that happened in this movie was when they dropped the atomic warheads.
Oh, yeah.
And then it lends to some of the best-looking epic imagery I think I've ever seen in a sci-fi film.
Oh, yeah, with the explosion and then also making it kind of like a dust, and an additional dust to the storm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more epic you could get than that, but that was really impressive to watch, I won't lie.
Yeah. Which kind of gave more cover and enough time for the worms to get closer to the base.
Oh, yeah. Another thing I was going to mention, too, about the worms is, like, we actually see smaller baby worms in this.
Oh, yeah, which kind of led to that one scene where the mother and the daughter...
Well, it's still growing.
Yeah, the baby inside, but you could, yeah. If it's active, you could almost say it that, like the daughter inside, but yes, it's still growing inside. But they ask for a demonstration of how it's done in terms of getting the elixir.
Yeah, and what they do is there's these little worms, and they establish that we can't put two worms in the same room or they'll kill each other.
Yep.
And so they get this one little worm out of the sand, and it latches on like a snake.
Yep.
And so they bring it to the water, and then you get to see the worm like open its mouth fully with the teeth sort of flowing. And then they stick a thing in, and that's how they get the elixir out.
Well, yeah, they kind of just drown the thing. Because, you put it in water, and its mouth is already open, so now it's just drowning. And then you can kind of see the last bubble goes out where it's like, okay, it's dead. So that way, once you put the thing inside, it's not going to be like...
Oh, okay. I think I may have missed the bubble coming out or two.
Yeah, because that was the thing where it's like, if it wasn't dead... The moment when the lady tried to put the thing inside, it would have latched on to try to eat the arm, the hand and the arm.
Oh, definitely. And actually, I was going to say this too, but with Lady Jessica and the fact that she's pregnant with Anya Taylor-Joy, because that's who the actress was when we see her in one of the sequences that Paul has of the future.
Yep.
It was kind of interesting how she's talking to basically... the growing baby in her body, assuming that the newborn can like talk while it's inside through telekinesis.
Yep.
I don't know if that's. I mean, I don't know. That was kind of out there.
I would say it is, but then again, with with the mom drinking the elixir, and supposedly the elixir kind of gives the person, and giving everything inside the person the knowledge and the pain and everything of past people that drink the elixir and seeing the future as well. But since there was a baby inside, she also gained that knowledge.
Yeah, I just don't know how it all works in this universe, but it's like you would think that a developing human in another person's body, like they would not have the telekinesis ability until they're like born, and somewhere down the line it begins to manifest.
Well, yeah, but why do you think the older lady, when she was kind of like falling back, saying, "What have we done?" She's pregnant. So now you got two working minds, basically.
Unless maybe the elixir enhanced the baby's abilities.
Well, that's the thing, because the elixir not only enhanced the mom, it enhanced the baby. So already, before it's born, basically, you've given the baby a mind, basically.
You've basically given it superpowers at this point.
Yeah.
It's like basically if you injected the X gene into your body and then it makes your kid a mutant. And they're going to be a mutant as soon as they're born.
Yeah, basically. Or any sort of power that you could think of, you inject it into the pregnant woman, and not only that she has the power, but her baby, or, the baby inside of her, will have the power as well.
Yeah, imagine if that went wrong. Like, they give the water of life, but they've never tested it on a pregnant woman before, and it goes bad. Like, imagine if that happened.
Yeah.
And then, like... Then they go, "What have we done? We should have asked her before doing this."
Well, they sort of acted like that. If you remember how the scene went, they sort of thought it was going down that path.
Oh yeah, now I remember.
Because they were acting like, "Oh crap, she's pregnant, and we gave her the elixir,
and we don't know what that's gonna do to the kid."
Yeah, but it turned out to be more positive. At least in this case, it feels like, than a negative.
Okay, yeah.
In the perspective of life and death.
Okay, yeah. It's just like when it comes to this story, it's like as much as this story made sense and the way you describe it, there is some stuff you do kind of want to think about a little bit.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Which is actually what happens to a lot of stories when you think about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I would say another moment I really liked, and this was a worm scene when Paul first rides on the back of a worm.
Yeah.
That was like, I don't know how to say this, but that was like the best triumphant scene I think I've ever seen in a movie. One of them, at least.
One of them. So like him, the ability to kind of like ride the giant worm after kind of like going through a bunch of like giant sand and sand kind of like flying through.
Yeah, and then you see the mouth of the worm coming close, and then Paul like jumps onto the back with the hooks.
Yep.
He sort of struggles a bit, and then he pulls up like one of its scales, and you can see these two breathing holes.
Yep.
And then he's like fully riding on the back, and then the music's all big and epic, and it's like
as it kind of like growing into like succession, basically, of him standing up.
Oh, definitely. And then another moment that kind of was kind of interesting was when Stilgar is describing, you go out in the desert, there's some stuff you're going to see. You're going to see these centipedes. The big ones won't hurt you, but the little ones will. Yeah. And then there's the Jinn, which are basically genie.
Yeah.
Because that's what they are in most mythologies, is Jinn or genie.
Yeah.
So it's like, you see the Jinn, don't go near them, they're desert demons.
Yeah.
That was kind of interesting.
Yeah, so kind of like haunting spirits, basically, of sorts.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was actually in the novel or not.
Yeah.
But if there was maybe some vision Paul had of seeing those.
No, that is interesting when he talked about like those other creatures. We didn't see them.
Yeah, we didn't, and it makes me wonder: are they really out there?
Yeah.
Or unless the worms are maybe eating all the bugs.
Yeah, is it more of the worms eating the bugs, or is it just kind of like more of the fact that maybe the guy was just trying to toy with them a little bit?
It could have been that, but maybe if I were, again, researching the mythos of this franchise a little more, I'd get more answers to that.
Probably, in this regard.
Yeah, but that was another little thing I liked. And then I'm trying to think, what other moments were there that I liked? Because we've kind of sort of mentioned all the top scenes almost.
Yeah. Let's see. We have a couple scenes like all the people kind of going towards the mother, saying, after the initial like aftermath of Paul's success riding the worm, spreading the word basically of his success riding the big giant worm.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that a little bit.
Because of her saying, all right, we've now gained a lot of success in the north. Now we must go south.
Oh, and then Paul's like, I can't go south. I'll lose Shawnee.
He'll lose a lot of things. He'll lose Shiny and all that stuff. But that's when he would still have like that good intention. But then it's like the pathway is like, nope, you still have to go there. You have no other choice.
Yeah, there was one other moment. And then the Emperor doesn't really get a lot of screen time in this. But anytime he's on screen, I will admit, Christopher Walken in this he was really good as the Emperor.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say his performance was similar to other stuff I've seen. It was good in its own right.
Speaking of that, going back to the Emperor, the other Emperor scene, I want to say the second one, where him and Florence were talking about how to deal with basically a religious figurehead, basically, or how to approach it, basically.
Oh yeah, there was that one line I liked from Florence where she's like, "You kill the prophet, well, that's just gonna make him more of a martyr, and then they're gonna rebel even further against you."
Yeah, because it's like if you do this way, because it's like if you attack them or oppress them, the faith is just good. The religion is just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Well, what if I said an assassin? Well, the assassin would just make him a martyr, as you mentioned, and it just make that even stronger. The only way to do it is let the war continue, but you come in as this other prophet, basically replacing one prophet over the other.
Yeah, and it's like he goes along with it because I guess he values his kids that much. He'll not like shoot them down or anything.
Yeah.
They could have written this character where he's like he's like really powerful and he doesn't want anybody questioning his methods. But it's nice that he hears his kids out and will actually go along with what they have to say.
Yep.
So that he doesn't end up becoming a casualty. At least that's how I would see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, any scene featuring the Emperor, minimal screen time, but he was really good.
Yeah.
I will admit that. And then any scene featuring the Baron was also really good.
Yeah.
Another thing that carried over from the first movie really well.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Dave Bautista's character.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the balance of the new people with the old people from the first one. Yeah, there was a lot of really good character interactions in this.
Yeah.
And I would say, when it comes to this story, it's like, again, you have to sort of watch it more than once to really appreciate it.
Yep.
And on my second screening, I did appreciate this a little more.
Yep.
I kind of want to see it again just to see if I do agree with the 5-star ratings.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, I think, this is a really well-made movie. I don't know if I would go as far as to say this is on the same level of quality as The Empire Strikes Back. But I would say that it's really close.
Yeah.
It's just this doesn't really feel like any of those other high-quality movies.
Yeah.
Because when they're comparing this to Empire Strikes Back, again, they're two completely different things.
One hand, yes, but on the other hand, because the story is a grandfather to all sci-fi films, and that includes Star Wars, wouldn't that be kind of like within its same ballpark, so to speak?
Well, here's where I'm coming from with Dune. Because the way I look at it, and this is something I did want to bring up.
Yeah.
The way I look at it with Dune, I see this as artistic sci-fi cinema.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it's made by someone he's basically making an art piece, but also has blockbuster elements to it.
Yeah.
And in Star Wars case, like, I wouldn't say Star Wars is artistic cinema, but it's blockbuster cinema where it's really well done.
Yeah.
The stories, for the most part, are engaging.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of movie that's more approachable. Star Wars is more approachable, where you'll be entertained from top to bottom. There's a lot of good stuff in it that you'll talk about endlessly. The same thing can be applied to Dune, but Dune's got a different approach with its storytelling, where it feels more like high art.
Yeah.
And I just feel like when people compare this to like Empire and Dark Knight and Terminator, they have to keep in mind that those three movies that I just mentioned, they are blockbuster cinema at best. When it comes to artistic quality, you can look for deeper meaning, and I'm sure it's there, but it's nowhere on the same level of complexity that comes with Dune.
Probably not, but they do showcase that they're all really good quality films that turn out to be a lot more successful, or more successful, however you want to do it, than the original, the first one. Heading into this, the sequel did better than the first.
Well, but in my case, it's like Dune is a giant film. I see it that way, and it's like cut in two for obvious reasons.
Yep.
And basically, because I think they're on the same level of quality, it's an artistic movie it's got the blockbuster stuff in there, but it doesn't really feel like a true blockbuster.
Yeah.
It feels like something else entirely.
All right.
Which is something that does happen with certain like high-grossing movies where they will be artistically made. Mm-hmm. They have blockbuster stuff in there, but they don't feel like the average blockbuster. They feel so much more.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's like, I don't really think when it comes to these two films, it's like none of them are better than the other.
Yeah.
I look at them as like, they're the same quality. Mm-hmm. They have the same goodwill and the same good traits that make them what they are, with the same artistic vision in mind from the same director. And for me, it's like, I just kind of see this as like, different from the other blockbusters I've ever seen. Yeah. That's how I look at it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's a lot of people that'll be on the same page with me as that, but you never know.
All right. Yep. Never know indeed.
Because, like, there was one thing I did want to mention with the Star Wars comparisons with Dune. Mm-hmm. At the very end, Jessica says a line that goes along, that's basically like, begun, the Holy War has.
It's like, because he's like, Paul has declared war on the other houses. The Holy War begins, Yeah,
and as soon as I first heard that line, I was like, Yoda, begun, the Clone War has.
Yep.
And then you see this shot towards the end where the Fremen are all loading up onto the ships, and the ships, they're going off to fight the other houses, which is actually what happened at the end Attack of the Clones. All the clones go on the ships.
Yep.
And you're going to see the Clone Wars play out in the TV series, and then, Revenge of the Sith.
Yep. It was very similar, because after that line, you kind of see how, like in the Clone Wars at the end, all the soldiers kind of like marching into their ships. Even though one's kind of marching in a more militaristic, imperialistic manner, while the other one's is more just everyone on board, even though it is still a military, but one's more imperialistic march towards the ship, while the other ones is just, just marching up onto their ships and getting ready for war.
Yeah, it kind of has the same vibe to it, and it makes me wonder, with the next Dune movie that's going to come, is it going to be more like, we're going to get more epic battles, we're going to get like actual full-scale war?
Yeah.
Like, are we going to get something much grander?
Yeah.
Personally, I don't know, because the director's still working on the script.
Yep.
I do know Hans Zimmer's working on music for the next movie already.
All right.
But yeah, Dune Messiah will be the next one. And then I'm like questioning if they're going to adapt the rest of the series afterwards.
We'll see, because supposedly in terms of the story, in terms of comparison, as we all talk about how Paul is Anakin / Darth Vader, supposedly the kids of Paul eventually becomes the ideal of Luke and Leia. Like the kids that were, born and turn out to be, good and, overthrow the father, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, if they do that in the sequels, and you're telling me they will, I do want to see how that plays out, but I don't want it to feel like a carbon copy of Star Wars.
No, I don't think it would be like the carbon copy, but it's kind of more of like again, since Dune was like the original, again, like that birthright of a lot of sci-fi films, we'll probably see a lot more of what Star Wars kind of like got inspired from the story.
I'm pretty sure people will make a lot of comparisons, and they will feel, completely different.
Yeah.
But I can see where you're coming from. But yeah, the whole time when it comes to Paul's descent, I think in terms of the storytelling, this is how Frank Herbert did it in the novel. Yeah. This is how the director's doing it, because he loves the book so much.
Yeah.
Lucas did it in a more approachable manner with Anakin, where it was much, easier to understand. There wasn't a lot of complexity to it.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of details that you have to sort of pick up on and stuff. Yep. But I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I just prefer to see them as like two completely different things.
Yeah.
just with the way they approach their stories.
Yeah.
But I think, to sum it all up, I liked this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if I put it back to back with the first one, I would say they're on the same level of quality.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was not one bad thing about any of these Dune movies.
Yeah.
They can be a bit slow, but they are interesting. Yeah. Like I wasn't bored.
Definitely are very interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I would say the runtime though can be a bit daunting because this thing's nearly 3 hours long.
Oh yeah.
But it's not like Snyder Cut level in terms of length.
Oh yeah.
Snyder Cut was much longer because let's just face it, Zack Snyder overloaded it with slow motion.
Oh yeah.
In this case, the director, he doesn't do anything stylish, but he's making this more like he's making this with artistic filmmaking skills in mind, and he's making this movie where I'm going to make it interesting, but I'm also going to frame it in a way where you're going to be intrigued from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's a lot of good things in this movie. The score is well done. The music is really epic. Mm-hmm. The framing, the cinematography, all epic. Mm-hmm. The acting, I thought everybody was really good. Not a single bad performance to be found.
Yeah.
The visual effects this thing's going to win Best Visual Effects next year.
Probably.
Because, the first Dune went to the Oscars. I can definitely see this one going to the Oscars.
Yep. Kind of very similar to, speaking of like visuals and stuff like that, Godzilla won it too, the -1.
Yeah, I actually wanted that to win because, King Kong won Best Visual Effects in the past. It only made sense for Godzilla to get his award at some point.
Yep.
And Oppenheimer's win was well-deserved.
Yep, definitely.
Same thing with Christopher Nolan. I really liked that. But yeah, with Dune, it'll probably get nominated for Best Picture. I don't think it'll win. But if it wins Best Visual Effects and maybe a few other technical things, I will be fine with that.
Yep.
Because the first Dune won 6 awards. If this wins the same amount, I'm okay with that too.
Yep.
And I am interested to see where they take the rest of the series,
Yep.
Because I don't know if this is going to make me a big fan of Dune or not. For other people, it might.
Yeah.
But for me, I just kind of want to see how this story plays out and if they adapt the rest of the series.
Yep.
I was warned, though, with the other Dune stories that it gets weird.
Yep, so we'll definitely see how it kind of like transpires in terms of like how weird it can get.
Well, what I mean by it gets weird is Frank Herbert never got to make Dune 7. His planned Dune 7, and his sons took over, or just his son. I don't remember how many kids he had.
Yeah.
But basically, when the son took over, that's when it got really weird, and that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
And there was a joke they made of that once, actually, but it wasn't with Frank Herbert. It was with J.R.R. Tolkien, where after Tolkien passed away, his grandson took over writing a sequel for Lord of the Rings, and it wasn't weird. It was all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that just kind of worries me is like if the sequels are really the later stuff is really weird, am I not gonna like it?
Yeah.
Or if it's so out there and its storytelling is highly questionable at best, is it gonna get really weird?
Yeah.
And that's again, if they adapt the rest of the stuff, I just kind of want to see how it plays out.
Definitely.
But there's been some instances in media where stuff started out really interesting, but then its storytelling went completely off the rails, and that's where I'm like, oh, this is no good anymore.
Yeah.
There's been like a ton of stuff that's happened too, especially with all the reimaginings and the reboots and the sequels they make. In Dune's case, well, again, I just kind of want to see how it plays out.
All right.
But at the end of the day, I really liked this movie.
Yeah.
It was very competent, very well made. There was a lot of stuff in it to really appreciate.
Yeah.
I thought, technically, this is one of the best-looking movies of the year.
It was really good looking so far. We'll see how the other eventual movies this year's kind of like play out, basically.
Yeah, we will. But when it comes to specific directors and their technical capabilities, they're going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
Like with James Cameron, for instance. Whenever James Cameron makes a movie, he's going to knock it out of the park in terms of like the visual effects. Which is why the later Avatar films, despite what people might say about them, they are going to look good.
Yep.
They're going to look so good that if they win Best Visual Effects, I would not be surprised.
Yep.
And, Marvel's been called out for their visual effects as of late. You can only hope they've learned from their mistakes and try to at least make the next two Avengers look good.
Yeah. But it is kind of like getting to its running out of ideas, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need to wrap it up or close it up. And they said something about a soft reboot, but honestly, I think they need to just close the franchise.
Yeah.
If they ended with Doctor Doom and Galactus, I am perfectly okay with that.
Yeah.
They just gotta work those guys into that cinematic universe in a way that makes sense.
Yep.
But we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. We'll see.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, you know what, I'm not gonna tell anybody to go see this because everybody's pretty much seen this movie at this point.
Yep.
And this is making money. The next Dune stuff is gonna get made.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do watch Dune, I would say go see it on the IMAX at your best opportunity.
Yep.
Because if you see it on the largest screen possible, it's gonna feel like an event.
Yeah.
It's gonna feel like this many years in the making, and it's worth it.
Yep.
And that was the case I felt when I did see it on the IMAX the first time.
Yep.
But I definitely kind of want to see this again
Mm-hmm.
because I just really I liked this. I thought it was well made,
Mm-hmm.
but I just don't think any of these Dune films are better than the other.
Yep.
Because if you put them together, it's one giant, close to 6-hour film.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that in terms of sci-fi cinema, we might not get this high in terms of artistic quality again.
Yeah.
Maybe we will, but I don't know.
Yep.
And I think before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts with Dune 2?
No other final thoughts. I think we cover a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, even if we were to recount the entire story, I would get a detail wrong or two.
Yeah.
But again, there was a lot of really good moments. And I know I called some of the story into question, but that's what happens
Yeah.
when you think about stories.
Yep.
But still, though, again, really well made. I just don't know if it'll make me read the books.
Yeah.
Maybe it will. But, I mean, the thing is, when I first saw Lord of the Rings, you know, that did eventually make me want to read the books.
Yep.
The books are really well done. There is stuff in there that's not in the movies.
Yep.
But you know what?
Like with any other stories adapted to films.
I mean, that's kind of the thing is like with Dune, it's like there's been multiple adaptations, and this one people are considering the definitive adaptation.
Mm.
But it took them like, this is the third adaptation of the story. It's like, took you that long to get it right, huh?
Yeah.
Whereas with Lord of the Rings, they got it right. Actually, no, there was an animated adaptation. But with the live action adaptation, Peter Jackson got it right the first time around.
Yeah.
With Harry Potter, there's only ever been like one adaptation, and that's the definitive adaptation.
Yep, that is the movies. Although they have left, in terms of each story, some minor details, whatever the case is, from, you know, the films left out some minor details that were in the books. But for the most part, they told the story.
Yeah, and I have heard arguments there is interesting stuff in the books that should have been in the movies.
Yep.
But that's the case with like any adaptation, really.
Yeah.
When it comes to like comic book characters, there's no like definitive adaptation because there's going to be multiple iterations of a character.
Yep.
So we kind of leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
There's been no definitive video game adaptation, but who knows how long it'll take until we get something that feels definitive.
Don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say you all have seen it at this point. This is our second time seeing it.
Yep.
Because I know you got to see it before we did this.
Yep.
But yeah, really well made. Really well made. You're probably going to see it. Just go see it.
Yep.
And anything else that's out, like, maybe whoever goes to see Kung Fu Panda 4, go on ahead. I need to see that at some point.
Yep. I mean, I thought that whole series was over with, but I guess not. 'Cause how long has it been since the third one?
The third one came out in 2016. And that one went completely under my radar when it came out.
Yeah.
But I will probably go see that on my own.
Yeah.
Kung Fu Panda 4, because I just kind of want to see how that entire story plays out. But
Yeah.
Dune right now, I mean, it's the talk of everybody at the moment. Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
People at work, where I work, everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's that big a thing.
Yep.
But I think at this point, the hype's kind of died down a bit. But if you go see it multiple times, be my guest.
Yep.
Because I know I'm going to see this a third time.
Yep.
But that's Dune Part 2, and I think the final thing we'll talk about before we close this video off, I think we should talk about the trailers a little bit.
Oh, so like all the trailers then, I take it?
Yeah, because when I saw this on the IMAX, they loaded it up with a lot of trailers where I went. But we only had 4 trailers where we went.
Yep.
First one was Boy Kills World.
Oh, yep. And this is the one where you're like, wait, really? But I recognize it right away, and I know the first time showing it, we were all kind of like, oh yeah, it's this guy. And I kind of told you, and you're like, wait, it was? The voiceover for the main character is...
Of Bob's Burgers.
Yep, is Bob from Bob's Burger, is the voiceover of the main protagonist of this film.
Yeah, see, it's kind of interesting when you pointed that out because I've seen a little bit of Bob's Burgers, but it's not really something I got into.
Yeah, I can show you some like clips of Bob's Burger, and you could be like, once you probably hear it a little bit more, you're like, oh yeah, that is, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but the thing is with Bob's Burger, something that kind of bothered me about it was some of the female characters clearly had male voices in the show.
Yep.
That was something that kind of bothered me.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably do that for comedic purposes.
Probably. But with Boy Kills World, it's this kind of, crazy action movie.
Yep.
With a little style to it.
Yep.
Which is actually something that was kind of prevalent when 2010 started out.
Yep.
And it looks like they're making it... I don't know what this is. Like, if it's based off of something, if it's completely original.
Don't know, but it did, now you mention it, it does bring back 2010 decade vibes a little.
Yeah, because I remember there were these, like, stylish movies with
Yeah.
some, like, crazy action coming out during that time.
Yeah.
You had Scott Pilgrim versus the World, you had Kick-Ass, you had basically anything that came out at that time.
Yeah. And then the second film, I believe, was Civil War.
Oh, yeah. This is something I had heard about. Saw a poster for it, not an actual trailer. But then I saw the trailer with you, and then...
I've seen that trailer multiple times. I think it was like last March. It was a while back I've ever seen the trailer for it. And now it was a while back. I don't know if it was last March. But I remember seeing a lot of the trailers for it. And now this is like now second time, but first legitimized time that we've seen like a trailer for it in the movie theaters.
Yeah.
Since it's kind of getting close to, if not, we're getting close to that release date of Civil War.
Oh, definitely. I think it comes out in April.
Yeah.
But what this movie's about, it's not a reenactment of the first American Civil War.
No, this is a kind of like you could say sci-fi, a fictional film of a second Civil War.
Basically, it's the hypothetical second American Civil War that some think could happen.
Yeah, in this case, it's kind of like, I believe I remember hearing the initial plot was, President is on a third term, which is, by the amendments, not possible. It's illegal to do, basically, to do a third term.
You're only allowed 2 terms.
You're only allowed 2 terms of president, but because somehow, I don't know, for what I got reread again, but however he got the third term, which caused a lot of states to basically secede.
I think it was only 2 in the trailer that seceded.
Yeah, 2 that we know about seceded, but they call it the Western Alliance. They call it that, so who knows how many more others. But as far as we know in terms of the trailer, it's Texas and California. And it's fictional when Texas and California are in alliance.
Yeah, like, when I saw
Be real, people.
I mean, when I saw that in the trailer, I'm like... Okay, California is Democratic.
Yep.
And Texas tends to be Republican.
Yep.
It's like, what deal did they reach that allowed them to be allies?
Yeah, no, so be real, people. Everyone knows that Texas and California are like the 2 biggest states in terms of their respective parties, and they probably both hate each other for it, for political reasonings. But at the same time, why on earth would they be in alliance with each other? You better be doing something wrong for those 2 to be in alliance.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, I just don't think there's any way those 2 would collaborate unless they came up with like some crazy deal that they can't refuse.
Yeah, so again, it's fictional when like a fictional civil war, when that is happening. Highly unlikely.
And the way they do the war scenes in the movie, they didn't really feel that big, if I'm being honest with you. They felt more like along the lines of an action movie.
Well, I mean, it's kind of it really feels more like it is still a war, but it's kind of like a guerrilla warfare type thing where the main American military is kind of like already, because you're already in, looks like, the supposedly enemy territory, it feels like. Because it's journalists and sort of like people who are just trying to survive, trying to do something, basically, to end this war, basically.
Yeah, I just got like strong action movie vibes out of this, not an actual war movie. Because if it was a much bigger war movie, you'd have like bigger, more epic battles. You'd have like battles that are like so big and so going on, you just can't comprehend them.
True. I kind of feel, I mean, it's not just a war, but I want to say a little bit more one-sided war, you could say, where it's the U.S. military versus what? Like, basically scattered remnants of states seceding, basically, and it's one-sided because, well, America has tanks and fighters and helicopters. What does the other states have?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's probably National Guard stationed throughout the whole country, so maybe the National Guard's like, well, we're giving you supplies.
Probably, maybe, but it's not going to be a whole lot compared to whatever the U.S. military has. But this felt not just, I mean, it's not like a big grand war like a true action movie would. It does, I would say it's action, but with drama.
Yeah, that's definitely what it's going to be, and I mean, we'll probably follow Kristen Dunst, who's the main character in this.
Yeah.
And she's basically doing her journalist-like thing of the war, which is actually something that happens in a lot of wars. There's a journalist out there documenting them.
Yep.
And in this case, like, we're going to see that. We're going to see, like, the cost of the war and the effect it's had.
I think you'll see two kind of like protagonists per se. The journalist, like you said, with the other guy. Then the family, which is the second group, that is kind of like just trying to survive, basically. You know, you have one hand, the journalist, you know, someone that supposedly should be in a protective figure, per se, because, you know, some political figures are going to need to tell their stories, basically, although trailer said no journalists should be entering DC, basically.
Yeah, because that they see later in the trailer that there's a lot of, like, you know, fighting going on.
Yeah, so, like, apparently journalism is basically prohibited in DC for reasons, basically. But besides that, journalists, because both sides needs to tell their stories, basically, so they probably are okay with journalists. Meanwhile, people, the family, which seems more like, you could say, just, again, they're trying to survive, basically. You're going to see kind of more of, like, that perspective of, like, the casualty of civilians in a conflict, basically.
I kind of want a scene in it where they establish that some American people don't want to participate in this war, so they went to Canada or they went to, like, somewhere else.
Maybe you could probably see that, and I would imagine, based on where it's probably located, we're probably going to see a little bit more of, like, the southern end, so maybe a little bit closer to, like, the Mexico border.
Yeah, I mean, they could definitely do that, but I just kind of want a scene where they establish some people went to other countries because they're afraid of, like, something really bad happening, or they just don't want to get caught up in all of it.
Yep.
Which they probably could throw in there, but that remains to be seen. I don't know if I'm going to watch this, though.
Well, yeah, we'll see, but this is definitely going to be, again, a fictional war.
Definitely, because, yeah, California and Texas aligning, crazy deal in order to make that a reality.
Yeah. So, next one.
Next trailer was Deadpool 3.
Yep. Which brought about the TVA.
Oh, yes. That's how they explain Deadpool comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yep.
And then, I just want to know how Wolverine comes into the Cinematic Universe.
Oh, I'm sure just because it's the TVA, there's one multiverse line where Wolverine is still alive and Deadpool's like, oh, my best friend.
Oh, yeah, because Ryan Reynolds has been wanting to do this for a very long time. It's going to be a buddy movie where the two team up and go on adventures together. I do know you're going to see Jennifer Garner as Elektra again in this.
Yeah.
And that led to a lot of speculation. Are we going to see Ben Affleck as Daredevil again? But the thing is, I don't know if Ben's going to come back or not.
Yeah.
Because some Marvel actors from old are like, well, Toby and Andrew did it, but I don't think we want to do it that much.
We'll see, but it's definitely going to be a lot more. Yeah, it's going to be like, okay, this is how Deadpool get in here, and here's Wolverine as a as a little bit of a cameo, also main protagonist into the film.
Yeah, it will be R-rated, because Ryan Reynolds said he's not doing this if it's not R-rated.
Yep.
Although, when we do eventually get to Deadpool 3, I'm going to say this right now. This is not how I would introduce Deadpool to the cinematic universe.
Well, you don't want the TVA to kind of be like, you're important here, Deadpool, or Wade Wilson.
Well, the way I would do it, and I'd have to describe it in detail when we get to Deadpool 3, is I would not have Deadpool be a multiversal variant. I would introduce him into the universe in a very traditional manner, but the way I would do it, let's just say Deadpool fans would not agree with me on it.
Well, I mean, in this case, because it fits the Deadpool character being a fourth wall breaker.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go into that, but I have seen one depiction of Deadpool that was not fourth wall breaking, and I really liked that depiction. It was really well done. I'll explain once we get to it. I mean, I kind of want to see how it plays out, because I have seen the other Deadpools. Will this one be better than the other two Deadpools in my mind? Well, Wolverine will make it more entertaining.
So yeah, it'll definitely be like a we'll see in terms of that regard. And I believe this is the fourth and final one before we get into
It was Furiosa.
Oh, that's right, Furiosa.
Looks good so far. I want to see that.
Yeah. I don't know. It kind of feels like it is definitely kind of like a side.
Well, it's going to explain how Furiosa came to be before we see her as Charlize Theron.
Yep. Oh yeah, and
in Fury Road.
In Fury Road. Yep. Yeah, because I was like, man, I know it's like talking about Furiosa, which was was the character in Fury Roads and from a while back, but I'm like, this definitely feels a lot more of like the side movie, basically. You know, kind of like the Solo story or Rogue One in the Star Wars franchise, where they're just like side stories.
Oh, definitely. But the way I see it, it's like George Miller wants to add more lore to the Mad Max world, so he's expanding Furiosa's story, and you're going to see. We actually will see the Green Place in this.
All right.
Because you see that scene where they're all running in like what looks like a rainforest kind of thing.
Oh,
Not rainforest, regular forest. But yeah, we're going to see that. We're going to see how Furiosa got her metal arm.
Yeah.
We're going to see how she lost her hair.
Yep, and we also we do see the main antagonist of the Fury Road.
Immortan Joe.
Yep. But where does Chris Hemsworth's character fits into the...
I think it's someone we've never seen before.
Alright, so will he die? Will he survive? And if he does survive, how will this play out? Or how will this kind of like fit into future films in terms of the Mad Max sort of series? Because...
Well, George Miller has said he wants to do a potential fifth film.
All right.
Which I don't know if that's going to get made, because George Miller's in his late 70s and stuff.
Yeah.
But Ridley Scott's still making movies. Maybe George Miller will get a chance to make it.
Yeah.
But it looks good so far. I think it'll give some nice explanation to how Furiosa is the way she is.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get some action that'll be like really well done, and a fantastic score that could be on the same level as Fury Road. But Fury Road's score was so good, it's going to be really hard to top that.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you there will be no Mad Max cameo in that, because this is completely Furiosa.
Well, yeah, because they don't meet until Fury Road, so I highly doubt that there will be, any Mad Max cameo, because they didn't meet until he was captured by them in Fury Roads initially, then he broke out.
Yeah. Unless they have unless they generate an AI clip, but I don't think George Miller will do something like that.
I think the only way we would have a cameo is like an epilogue scene where we kind of like get the, the epilogue is the intro to.
It leads into Fury Road.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's probably gonna happen, and I'm gonna watch Fury Road again because Fury Road, it was the most fun I've had at a cinema.
Yeah.
But I'll go into that once we get to Furiosa.
Yeah.
I will say this, though. There was no Godzilla X Kong trailer.
Nope.
But that will be our next one.
Yep.
Because I'm definitely looking forward to that one.
And there's definitely a lot more kind of like, trailers popping out now for that Godzilla Kong movie.
Yeah, and the trailer kind of hinted at this, but is Space Godzilla going to be the villain? Because there's a hint he might be the villain.
I think I saw some hints or saw some clips. It doesn't seem that way.
Well, there was something in the trailer. It looked glowing blue eyes, and it breathes what looks like Godzilla's atomic breath on Kong.
I think it's a different one. But it's an ice-based creature.
An ice-based creature, so...
Or a creature that breathes out ice.
Oh, if this ends up being Crystallock, that'll be an interesting addition.
Yeah.
Because Crystallock was an original character in one of the Godzilla games.
Yeah.
But I just kind of want to see how that plays out. But that'll be our next one, because I think that one might be fun.
Yeah. Then I think I remember seeing a little clip of Godzilla actually throwing a punch at one of the kaiju monster. It was like a spider-like or a crab-like creature. He just threw a punch and then just kind of like then grabs him and tossed the crab to the to the side. It's like oh crap!
I don't think I saw that in the trailer, but yeah, that'll be our next one, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, there's some new trailers though. Just giving a heads up though.
Oh, I'm gonna have to find them. But with Godzilla X Kong, we will not be able to get to it opening weekend because that's Easter weekend.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you all have plans for the holidays. I know we both do. But when we get to that, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a while to get to that, but that's the next one. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say with the trailers.
Yep.
But yes, Dune Part 2, we quite enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed this as much as the first one. Again, I don't think one of them outweighs the other.
Yeah.
That's just me. I know some people are going to say otherwise, but, you know, I'm definitely seeing this at least one more time.
Yeah.
One more time. And then I can move on to Kung Fu Panda 4, Godzilla X Kong, and some other stuff. But I would say we had a pretty good sci-fi release in Dune Part 2.
Yep.
And whether or not another sci-fi film gets up to the same level of artistic quality as this remains to be seen.
Yep.
Because this was a very competently well-made movie.
Yep.
And it did, you know, what it needed to do. It succeeded, and I am interested to see where the series plays out. But anyway, that's, I think, all we have to say.
Yep.
And, yeah, that's the movie.
Yep.
But until we see Godzilla, take care.
Yep.